is Michael Popok. Look at the time. It's time for Legal AF After Dark. Courts, like in Georgia, are struggling under the strain of cases filed by MAGA and Donald Trump early to try to argue election fraud and try to suppress the vote even before we voted. Georgia's Supreme Court, surprisingly, just did something that's actually in favor of democracy, the rule of law, and voting in Georgia just in time for the election right around the corner. We break it all down for you. Where else? Legal AF, the podcast. Take a listen. You know, if you don't mind, why don't we do Georgia first, right off the heels of that, kind of pick up the steam here about judges doing the right thing before we get to the ones that are promoting themselves to be appointed to some Supreme Court position or Attorney General. So you did a nice hot take on it. I did one recently too about Georgia, where we last left it when we were together at the midweek, is we had two cases at two judges at two different courtrooms inside of the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Judge Cox and Judge McBurney. Both got cases that were similar about the new rules that the state election board had passed at the last minute in September when they got the 3 votes majority for MAGA, 7 new votes, the 2 that gets the 7 new rules, the 2 that get the most publicity are hand counting every ballot the night of the election or so, which seems impossible. And the second related to reasonable inquiry into that any related to certification that any one MAGA county board member could raise to try to delay certification. So rules that delayed the vote counting and rules that delayed the vote certification, and empowering in counties where MAGA was outnumbered, any one MAGA could raise an issue and not agree to certify, which was a monkey wrench that would delay things. And would stop the vote certification and Georgia participating in our national election unless court ordered to do so, and then vote counting. And they came up in different ways to the judge. And McBurney, it came up as a temporary restraining order about the county board and it being forced to use these new rules, which they said they couldn't possibly do. And he had to make a decision on a temporary basis about some of those rules. But at the same time, Judge Cox had a full-blown hearing with evidence and briefing, and he was ready to go to final judgment. So in one day, we reported that Judge McBurney ruled that certain of the rules on a temporary basis, because they were passed so late in the game, would not apply to the upcoming election. And then 2 days later, a judge some people were asking, why do they consolidate them into one case so we didn't have a possibility of conflicting rulings? That's a very good question that got asked, and I don't know the answer to it. But because we could have had one judge issuing one order and one judge saying, no, I think the rules are fine, and then we're up at the Georgia Supreme Court. So then you had Judge Cox, right, who said, why don't you take Cox, what he said about the rules, final judgment order, and then how this got to the Georgia Supreme Court by way of the Republican National Committee and Georgia Republicans, and what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, look, Judge McBurney was basically focusing on the fact that, look, this is going to cause chaos and confusion. This is too close to the election. We haven't had enough time to prepare. We haven't had enough time to hire people and train people, and it's just going to sow chaos. That didn't appear to be the issue that Cox was focusing on. Instead, he was focusing on the fact that these new rules were unsupported by any part of the Georgia's election statutes. And he found that the rules are actually contrary to the election code. He said they're inconsistent with the law. And, he kind of really smacked them down and made a ruling on the merits, as you said, after a trial on these various rules, saying, no, you 3-member MAGA election board people, that's not how you can make these rules. They're inconsistent with the laws that the legislature has passed in Georgia. So no, you can't do that. The way to do that and make different rules is to go to the legislature. And Judge McBurney, because his was in a different posture, his was sort of this temporary, this is like an emergency posture, make a decision quickly. He said, look, it's just too chaotic, too quickly, and it's the opposite of an orderly election. And what happened this week was this emergency application before the Georgia Supreme Court. And as I like to say, the court unanimously issued what I call a 2-word decision, denied. They just denied this. And they basically said, no, we're not going to do these new rules. We are not going to implement these last minute election rules. We are going to just keep it the way it is. And let's just keep going. And that was lovely to see, right? And especially in a state like Georgia, where there's, it can be a conservative state, that again, the rule of law actually matters. And I'm just very happy to see judges doing the right thing and not being partisan.
Yeah, we don't know exactly why that happened. And Georgia's a weird place, right? The Republican governors are generally not MAGA, including Kemp. I don't love everything he's ever done, but he's not MAGA, and he's been on the wrong side of Donald Trump enough that we know that, including in 2020, when Donald Trump was breathing down his neck to hold special sessions of the General Assembly in Georgia to try to get to the bottom of the voter fraud issue, to try to turn the tide and find 11,780 votes. And Donald Trump hasn't relented yet. Every time he's in Georgia, he always finds a way to criticize Kemp. So the people that are on the Supreme Court are appointed by governors that are Republican in Georgia, but not necessarily that unique brand of Republican called MAGA. The last time I can't remember the last time there was a Democrat who was the governor of Georgia. I wonder if we have to go back to Jimmy Carter, who's just turned 100. So I was like, I don't know, this brand of Republican, what are they going to do? But they did the right thing in a very short order. They just said the emergency application for an appeal now to happen without the normal course, which is months of appellate work. It would be like a year, and whether they're even going to take this as a direct appeal. See, the Republicans skipped a step. They skipped one level of appellate court, and they went right to the Georgia Supreme Court. And there's very narrow grounds to skip a step and end up at your highest court in the state like Georgia. And I don't know whether they didn't qualify for it. I looked at their petition briefly before we started recording, and we can't tell from the order, but they did not feel that the emergency was present, nor the need to do it. And I think it's because we're 12 days or 13 days away from the election. Courts that want to do that and monkey around with our justice system, like the United States Supreme Court in 2000, the Florida Supreme Court in 2000, they'll find ways to do, like, briefing over 36 hours and hearings, but most courts are like, you know what, we don't really have enough time on the clock here to do this. Now, it doesn't mean that in 2025 they're not going to have to make an ultimate determination whether the state election board, this board that we're talking about, has the power, a 5-person board as delegated by the legislature of Georgia, to change all of these rules about voting or counting, or whether that resides with the state houses. I mean, it is inconsistent with the other fringe theories that MAGA has been promoting, like the independent legislature doctrine, which says that there is no body other than the legislative body that can make decisions about voting and time, place, and manner and other things. And that means ignore our Secretary of State, especially if he's from a different party, ignore our governor, ignore our heads of election, and ignore our election board. So there's going to be this battle here. This is not consistent with some of the fringiest theories that are running around and trying to make their way to the U.S. Supreme Court about the power of these state houses. And so we're going to see what happens. That's I think one of the beauties of the show is that we do follow up and do follow on with stories like this. Welcome back. That was Legal AF. We do it twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We've been doing it for 4 years. There's over 1,200 episodes, and that was from our most recent one. We sit at the intersection of law and politics so you don't have to, and we break down commentary and analysis like no other show, I believe, on YouTube. We're glad you're here. If you know all about us, you're part of that 50 million views a month, every month, and downloads. Thank you from the bottom of our heart. We're building this entire enterprise independently, only with your help. But go over, download, Listen to the episode on audio wherever you get your audio podcast from, and tune in on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, where we do and we curate about 3 or 4 stories at that same intersection of law and politics. If you don't know about us, here's my personal invitation. I'm Michael Popok, welcoming you to Legal AF here on the MeidasTouch Network. And then we got that new channel, Legal AF, the YouTube channel, where you can get all things Legal AF and even more drilled down on law and politics, Legal AF MTN on YouTube. So until my next hot take or Legal AF, the podcast, or contribution to Legal AF, the YouTube channel, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.